My name is Barbara Hensley. I am 66 years old, and for most of my life, I worked as a bookkeeper for a small family-owned hardware store in Ohio. Numbers were my comfort, steady, obedient things that never lied. I raised my son Ryan alone after my husband passed, and I believed, foolishly perhaps, that love and patience could build anything solid, even after loss. But on that morning, standing in the dim light of the attic, I learned that what you build for decades can vanish with one sound, a lock clicking shut from the other side. I remember his footsteps on the stairs, heavy and impatient. "You'll starve up there," he shouted, his voice sharp as glass, echoing against the old beams. Then came the sound that still lives in my bones, the metallic turn of the key. I thought he was joking, but the car starting outside told me otherwise. If you're listening, don't look away now, because this isn't a story about cruelty. It's about how quiet strength can sound like silence before it speaks. Sometimes the people who bury you think they've written your ending. They don't know you can still write from beneath the floorboards. The phone slipped from my hands as I lunged toward the door. It hit the wooden planks, the screen cracking in a bright, pitiful spark before it went dark. For a moment, I just stared at it, breathing hard, the air thick with dust and disbelief. Through the tiny attic window, I saw the car door slam, Ryan's shadow moving beside Tina's. A burst of laughter floated up, bright and careless. Then the engine roared, and the world below me went still. The attic was colder than I remembered. I could smell the dry cedar, the faint must of winter clothes stored too long. My knees hurt when I sank to the floor, my palms pressed against the wood that once held Christmas boxes and my husband's old tools. It was strange, how quickly the familiar turns into a cage. I whispered his name, Ryan, as if he might turn around. But all I heard was the thrum of the departing car fading into the distance. My throat tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of something final. He had meant it. He'd locked me in. Somewhere downstairs, a clock ticked on the wall, muffled and steady. I counted the seconds like I used to count the change in a register, each one proof that time was still moving, even if I wasn't. A thin ray of light cut across the floorboards, and I followed it with my eyes. That was when I saw the spot near the far corner, the one I hadn't looked at in years. The wood there had a different color, a memory of movement. Beneath it, I knew, was the safe my husband installed after the accident, the one no one else knew existed. I tried to shake the thought away. Panic makes the mind reach for impossible things. But then I remembered how Ryan's tone had changed these past months. The way he'd started calling me Mom, only when he needed signatures. The way Tina's laughter turned hollow when I entered a room. And suddenly, the impossible didn't feel so far. I pressed my palm against the floorboard. The cold from the metal underneath seeped through the cracks, and I felt something like a pulse, a reminder that the story wasn't over, not even close. It's strange how silence can sound when you're the only one inside it. There's the whisper of dust, the sigh of the house settling, and somewhere beneath all that, the memory of your own breath. I steadied mine and listened. Outside, a bird called once, twice, then stopped. I closed my eyes and saw Ryan as a boy, standing in this same house, small hands gripping the railing, eyes full of questions. I used to think I could keep him safe forever. I never imagined I'd need to keep myself safe from him. The attic air grew heavier with every passing minute. I touched the cracked phone again, hoping for a sign of life, but the screen stayed black. My reflection in it looked unfamiliar, older, smaller, yet somehow clearer. Maybe this was what truth looked like when you had nowhere left to hide from it. Then faintly I heard it, the fading echo of a suitcase wheel rolling over gravel. "Hawaii," he had said. A week of rest. A reset. I'd smiled then, proud he could afford such a trip. Now the irony burned. He'd flown toward paradise while locking his mother in the past. I leaned back against a beam, trying to slow my heart. The wood felt solid, unyielding, like the years I'd spent holding our life together. I whispered to the stillness, "You don't know what's under your feet, Ryan." The words surprised even me, low and steady. They felt less like despair, more like a promise. I could almost hear my husband's voice then, the one that used to calm me through storms. He'd say, "Barb, every number adds up if you wait long enough." Maybe this too would add up, to something unexpected. The attic window flickered with the reflection of sunlight off the departing car. I watched until it disappeared beyond the trees. Then I turned my gaze back to the floorboards, tracing the faint outline where memory and metal met. My hands stopped shaking. What Ryan didn't know was that the safe beneath the attic held more than just money. It held records, papers, proof of ownership he'd never think to look for. It held the parts of my life I'd never trusted him to handle. Maybe that was why he wanted me gone. Maybe that was why this felt less like an ending and more like the start of a reckoning. I inhaled, slow and deliberate. The air tasted of dust and something else. Resolve. I thought of all the women I'd known who'd been told to stay quiet, to endure, to forgive. Maybe I'd been one of them for too long. So I whispered to the empty room, letting the words anchor me. I'm still here. Somewhere below, the clock struck once, the sound dull but certain. And with that, I knew what I needed to do. The safe wasn't just metal and numbers. It was my voice, waiting to be heard again. He thought he'd left me with nothing, but he forgot that even silence can be a plan waiting to unfold. My name is Barbara Hensley. I am 66 years old, and I have lived in this house longer than most of the maples in the yard. The house taught me to measure life in small, steady things. A paid bill, a repaired roof, a warm supper. After my husband died, I balanced ledgers by day and comforted a small boy by night. Numbers were my refuge, but the real work was quieter. Mending shirts at midnight, pacing the budget with worn envelopes, choosing which repair could wait. Ryan was 7 when I learned how much grief could bend a life. I worked extra shifts so he could take lessons. I remember an old abacus on the windowsill, its beads smoothed by years of thumbprints. I would push a bead for each tuition check, for each dent in the car fixed, for each winter coat that arrived in time. The abacus is still in its glass case by the dining room window. It looks sentimental now, but it was a ledger of promises. When he graduated college, I felt proud in a way that hurt. I paid for that degree with small sacrifices and late nights balancing numbers under a lamp. I watched him tighten his tie and walk away, imagining a steady life ahead. Love makes you believe in arithmetic that does not always add up the way you intend. In the years after Ryan married, the house changed in ways that were subtle at first. New cushions replaced the threadbare ones. A brass lamp appeared on my bedside table. When they visited, their laughter had a sheen to it, the kind that photographs well. They brought a taste of city polish that could, without meaning to, make a place feel smaller. The first time I met Tina, she handed me a small gift and complimented my curtains with a practiced smile. She was friendly in the way people practice being friendly for company. I watched Ryan watch her and felt glad for him, but I did not see how that gladness would be turned into exacting measurements of promise and paper. Legal papers began to show themselves in small folds. A refinance notice here, a casual mention of a joint account there. When Ryan spoke of joint ownership, I nodded. If your child talks about shared plans, you might not parse the grammar for danger. Once I asked about an appraisal and he said it was routine. I filed it away, trusting that we would review papers together when we had time. Lucille's voice arrived in small counsel, often over the phone. She advised caution and spoke of protecting status. At the time, her words sounded like common sense, not a blueprint. Advice can be ordinary mother-in-law talk until you see how it rearranges priorities. I kept the abacus and receipts like a quiet inventory of devotion. Each bead held a small victory: a semester paid, a bill handled, a winter kept from being cold. Those victories were the architecture of my life. I had believed architecture made things secure, that years of careful accounts meant a house could not be taken apart around you. But houses are porous. People move through them and sometimes pull pieces without noticing. I began to see changes in the margins: a new signature on a form, an account reading as joint rather than sole. Ryan mentioned selling, if it makes sense, words that softened a reality into conversation. Each shift felt like a bead nudged across the abacus, almost nothing until you read the total. Watching someone you raised learn to use advantage is a particular sorrow. It arrives quiet as a rumor, a practiced tone when asking for a favor, a smile that seems measured, a casual mention of paperwork. You notice patterns: a notarized form, a subtle shift in language. Love and leverage start to look similar. One afternoon, Ryan packed a suitcase with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Tina carried a cardboard box and mentioned using my husband's old wrench for a rustic accent. I said nothing as they left. Inside, the abacus watched from its glass like a witness to a change I did not yet name. At the kitchen table, I ran numbers the way I always had: mortgage years, tuition paid, tools sold. The math held a truth. I had given much, and the house bore those gifts quietly. That truth was not a punishment. It was simply a ledger demanding attention. I never stopped loving Ryan. Love does not blind you to new realities. It makes you notice them. My duty had been to teach him how to count honestly. Somewhere along the way, he learned to count differently. So I left the abacus where I could see it. I kept receipts in order and deeds in a safe place. Then, one evening, I found a note of an appointment for refinancing with a title company name I did not know. 1,000 small beads clicked in my chest like warning bells. I did not feel panic. I felt the stillness of someone who had always kept accounts and suddenly understood that some numbers required her intervention. I touched the glass case and whispered, as I had whispered while balancing years of bills, "I will count this too." When Ryan and Tina moved into my house, it was supposed to be temporary. "Just until we find our own place," he said, standing in the doorway with his arm around her shoulder. I smiled and nodded, because that's what mothers do. The boxes filled the hallway by evening, labeled with her neat handwriting: kitchen decor, linen, media room. My old labels, Christmas, taxes, keepsakes, looked smaller beside them. They came with bright plans and new furniture. The living room that once smelled faintly of cedar now carried the scent of perfume and lemon polish. The quilt I'd sewn years ago was folded and stored to preserve it, Tina said, placing a throw from a designer brand in its place. Her phone was always in her hand. "We're restoring the vibe," she told her followers, tilting the screen to show the sunlight hitting the window just right. I heard her voice echo across the room. "Our vintage house has such character." I stood behind the camera's frame, unseen, realizing she hadn't said my mother-in-law's house. It was just ours. The word lingered like paint still drying. At first, I tried to stay out of their way. I cooked early, cleaned quietly, left notes about small household things: how the dishwasher sticks, how the front porch light hums before it flickers off. The notes went unread. Within days, Family photos began to vanish from the mantel. The frames disappeared, and in their place came glass vases and scented candles. When I asked where the photos went, Tina smiled and said, "We're decluttering. You'll love it. It's very modern." Whitaker stopped by that week, his cane tapping the steps before his voice reached the porch. "You still keeping records the old way, Barbara?" he asked, nodding toward my folder of bills. I told him about the move-in, how they wanted to help me manage things. He listened, frowning slightly. "You ever sign anything new?" he asked. "Just routine things," I said. "Insurance papers, bank updates." His expression didn't change. "Keep copies," he said softly, "and don't sign anything you don't understand." That night, I found one of those forms again on the kitchen counter, waiting for my signature. The heading read, "Property Adjustment Form." I stared at it long enough for the clock to strike twice. The words blurred. I didn't sign. Days turned into a rhythm of small erasures. My schedule was no longer my own. Tina filmed her cooking tutorials in my kitchen, rearranging spices by color. Ryan worked from the dining table, his laptop open, his phone buzzing every few minutes. When I asked if he wanted coffee, he said, "Sure, Mom," without looking up. It was the kind of mom you give to a stranger offering directions. One afternoon, I returned from the grocery store and saw a delivery truck leaving the driveway. Inside the house, the old armchair my husband used to sit in was gone. "We're redesigning the sitting area," Tina said cheerfully. I looked at the empty space and felt something inside me shift, like a loose tile underfoot. "It's just furniture," she added. "Change is good for energy." At dinner, I set the table with 3 plates. Tina replaced my old dishes with her new set, white porcelain with gold rims. "Looks more elegant," she said. Ryan nodded. "Mom, you should let us handle the grown-up stuff now. You've worked hard enough." I smiled, because the words hurt less when you cover them with a smile. Later that night, while they laughed in the living room, I sat in my bedroom with my notebook open. I wrote down dates, transactions, small changes that seemed harmless alone, but formed a pattern when lined up. I'd done this my whole life, tracking cents and hours, and now it felt like I was tracking something invisible, something that might soon be taken from me if I didn't keep count. The next morning, I noticed the photo of my husband that used to hang in the hallway had been moved into the storage closet. "It's safer here," Ryan said when I asked. "We're repainting that wall." But the wall was already dry. I touched the empty space where the frame once hung and thought about the safe under the attic floor. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the proof of everything I had built. When Whitaker called again, I mentioned the form. He sighed through the line. "Be careful, Barbara. Sometimes people talk about helping when they mean replacing." His words sank deep. I looked around my house, the one I had bought, cleaned and protected for decades, and realized how quickly familiarity can turn foreign. That night, Tina hosted a live stream. The title flashed across her screen, "Restoring Our Dream Home." I stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching her adjust the camera, her laughter floating into the empty hallway. She panned the lens across the walls, the lights, the gleaming counter. When she turned, my reflection appeared behind her on the screen for a brief second, small, half in shadow. Someone in the comments typed, "Is that your mom?" Tina hesitated, then smiled. "That's just Barbara. She's family. Just Barbara. Not my mother-in-law, not the woman who built this house." I walked back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of my bed. The house creaked in the night like it was trying to remind me who it belonged to. For the first time, I didn't feel like its owner. I felt like a guest waiting for permission to stay. Still, I opened my notebook and added one more line at the bottom of the page. When someone says they're helping, always ask what they're keeping. My 66th birthday came and went like an afterthought. I woke that morning to the sound of clinking glasses and laughter downstairs. For a moment, I thought it was for me. I had even baked a small cake the night before, my habit since Ryan was little. Chocolate with a thin layer of icing, simple, soft, familiar. But when I walked into the kitchen, the counter was covered with pastries from a cafe, and Tina was adjusting the light for her phone. "Smile day," she said to her followers, showing off the breakfast spread. My cake sat untouched in the corner, still wrapped in foil. Ryan wasn't home. "He had to run some errands," Tina said, glancing at her screen more than at me. "We'll celebrate later, don't worry." She kissed the air in my direction and went back to filming. I didn't expect candles or presents, but I did expect presents. I spent the afternoon pruning roses in the garden. The air smelled like wet soil and lilac, a scent that used to mean peace. Around 3, I heard voices from the patio. Ryan had returned, and with him came a different tone. I could hear Lucille's name through the open window, her words bleeding through the speakerphone. "Sell now before the market drops, and get her settled somewhere safe. You've done your part." "Mom doesn't need all that space," Ryan said. "She'll be better off at Maplewood." His voice was calm, businesslike. "We can use the sale to cover the debt, and she'll have care. It's not cruel, it's responsible." Tina said something quieter. "But what if she finds out about the appraisal?" "She won't," he replied. "She trusts me." The roses blurred before my eyes. My pruning shears trembled in my hand. I stayed still until their voices drifted inside. Then I sat on the garden bench and stared at the house I had built with 30 years of wages and worry. Every beam, every tile had a story. And now, those stories were being itemized and priced. Inside, the dining table was already set for 2. Wine glasses, candles, a bottle chilling in the bucket. I thought maybe they were planning a surprise dinner. Hope has a cruel habit of reviving just when you need it least. But when they came home with grocery bags and laughter, the surprise was for someone else. "We're having friends over tonight," Tina said brightly. "You don't mind, right? It's just a few people." I nodded, my throat tight. She poured wine into 2 glasses and handed one to Ryan. He raised it in a small toast, saying, "To new beginnings." I smiled politely, the way strangers do at a table that used to be theirs. After they went upstairs, I cleaned the kitchen. It was nearly midnight when I found the envelope near the coffee machine, a folded packet with an appraisal document sticking out. The numbers made my stomach turn. The property value was listed higher than I expected, and under ownership, I saw 2 names, Ryan Hensley and Barbara Hensley, joint owner. The date was recent. My hand shook as I traced my name. The signature was mine, but not mine. Whitaker's words echoed, "Keep copies. Don't sign anything you don't understand." I searched through the drawers for my folder, the one with my deeds and old insurance forms. It was gone. The space where I used to keep it was empty, except for a single lavender sachet. Tina's, no doubt. I closed the drawer slowly, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. The party downstairs grew louder. Music, laughter, the clinking of glass. I sat in the hallway, where the noise was muffled, and tried to make sense of it all. How do you measure betrayal? Is it the weight of a forged signature, or the silence that follows it? I walked back to my room and found the abacus on my nightstand. It must have been moved when they redecorated. The beads were all on one side, as if someone had cleared the slate. I slid one bead across, then another, whispering the years it stood for. One for his schooling, one for his first car, one for the roof. My voice cracked. One for believing this would never happen. I didn't cry that night. I think I was past crying. Instead, I sat at my desk and wrote 3 lines in my notebook. They planned to sell the house. My signature was forged. I will find proof. In the morning, Tina mentioned how tired I looked. You should rest more, Barbara. Stress isn't good for you. She handed me tea, sweetened too much. Ryan and I have been talking about options. Maplewood has great reviews. Options, I repeated, pretending to sip. That's kind of you. She smiled, missing the undertone. You'll thank us later. When she left the room, I opened my phone and searched for elder financial abuse and power of attorney fraud. Each article I read felt like déjà vu. Case after case of parents losing homes, accounts, names, people who loved too much and signed too soon. By noon, I called Whitaker. It's happening, I said simply, and I think I can prove it. He sighed. Then it's time to gather what they didn't count on you keeping. That night, while the house slept, I opened the attic door and climbed the stairs, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The air was thick with dust and old memories. I crouched in the far corner where the boards felt uneven. My husband had once told me, "This house has a few secrets, Barb. Keep one for yourself." I pressed the edge of the plank, and it lifted just slightly under my touch. The space beneath was small, but I saw the outline of the safe. My pulse steadied. Happy birthday to me, I thought. The beginning of something they won't see coming. It started with a cough, nothing serious at first. Early spring air had shifted, the nights colder than they looked, and I thought it was only my sinuses again. But within days, the fever came. My head felt full of fog, my hands trembling even when I tried to pour tea. I told Ryan I needed to see a doctor, and he said, "Of course, Mom," without looking away from his laptop. Tina was filming at the time. I could see myself reflected in her camera lens, my gray hair uncombed, my breath shallow, my face half out of focus. By evening, the cough turned to dizziness. I heard laughter downstairs, then the sound of a door closing. I called Ryan's name once, twice. No answer. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapping myself in an old quilt. The house felt bigger when you were sick, its silence sharper. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting through the curtains. My phone showed a text from Tina. "We're staying at Lucille's for the weekend. Get some rest." No question mark, no check-in. I tried to stand, but the room swayed. I made my way to the kitchen for water. The dishes from last night still sat in the sink. I leaned against the counter until the shaking stopped. A knock came around noon. It was Martha, holding a pot covered with a towel. "You sound terrible," she said, stepping inside before I could protest. "I brought soup, chicken, and barley. You need real food, not tea and air." She set the pot on the stove and looked around. "Where are they?" "With her mother," I said quietly. "Just for the weekend." Martha frowned. "And you're here, sick, alone?" "I'll be fine." She stirred the soup, her eyes not leaving me. "Barbara, fine isn't the word I'd use. You don't look fine. Sit." The warmth from the bowl brought me back to myself. Between sips, she asked about the papers Whitaker mentioned. I told her about the forged signature, the missing folder, and the attic. Her face tightened. "You think they're trying to take the house?" "I don't think," I said softly. "I know." Martha put down her spoon. "Then you need to document everything. Every call, every message, every piece of mail. If you're right, you'll need proof." Her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen too much to still be polite about it. She told me about her sister, who'd nearly lost her house when a nephew tried to take over her accounts. "You'd be surprised how many good families do bad bookkeeping," she said. Keep receipts, dates, names. Don't tell them what you're doing. After she left, I sat at the table long after the soup cooled. The notebook lay open beside me, the ink from the last entry smudged where my fevered hand had rested. I wrote a new line beneath it. Gather proof. I started small. Emails printed. Text messages photographed. Bank statements folded carefully and tucked into an envelope. My fever made the letters blur, but my mind was sharp in a way that fear sharpens you. That evening, Ryan called. "Hey, Mom, feeling better?" "Getting there," I said. "Good. Listen, we might extend our stay at Lucille's. She wants us to help with some family things. You'll be okay, right?" "Of course," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Good. Oh, and don't worry about bills. I'll handle them this month. Less for you to stress over." My heart stilled for a beat. "That's kind of you," I said, though my hand already reached for the file drawer. When we hung up, I checked the mail pile. The electricity bill was missing. So was the mortgage statement. Later that night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe around me. Wood expanding, air moving through vents, the low hum of the refrigerator. I imagined my husband sitting in his chair, reading the paper, reminding me that numbers don't lie. I whispered to the dark, "Then let the numbers save me." By morning, I felt worse. The fever broke, but exhaustion clung to me. I made myself a list, small steps I could manage without raising suspicion. Find Whitaker's number, record dates and calls, check the attic safe. I pulled on a sweater and climbed the stairs, my breath short, my knees unsteady. The attic was colder than before. Dust floated in beams of light like falling snow. I pressed my hand to the floor where the plank lifted, but I didn't open it yet. I wanted Whitaker there when I did. That afternoon, Martha returned with groceries and more soup. She handed me a pen and a small notebook. "Write everything," she said, "even what seems small." I nodded. "You sound like Whitaker." "Good," she said. "He's the only lawyer I've ever liked." When she left, I sat again at the table. My voice was still weak, but my mind was gathering strength. I took a breath and began recording myself quietly on an old voice memo app. April 12th. House occupied by Ryan and Tina. Unauthorized appraisal discovered. Suspicion of forged signature. Health condition stable. It felt strange, talking to an invisible listener, but it steadied me. It made what was happening real, documented, undeniable. That night, a text from Tina arrived. "Hope you're feeling better. Mom says you should think about assisted living. We'll talk when we're back." I stared at the words until the letters blurred again. Then I closed my phone, turned off the light, and whispered, "Talk, yes. But not the way you think." I placed Martha's notebook beside my bed, pen ready, and drifted into uneasy sleep. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, brushing against the window pane like fingertips. The house creaked, as if remembering something. Somewhere in the dark, between fever and resolve, I understood that sickness had given me a gift. Time to see the truth, unfiltered. The people I raised and welcomed were already planning a life without me in it. But they'd forgotten one detail. I was still here to keep the records. The day I lifted the attic plank, the air felt heavier than before, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I moved slowly, careful not to let the old boards creak too loudly. The light from the small window stretched across the floor in a pale beam, touching the spot I had traced with my eyes for weeks. My hands were steady, though my heart wasn't. The first sound of the metal safe scraping against wood brought back the smell of the day my husband installed it. Oil, dust, and the faint scent of his cologne. He'd said, "For whatever life doesn't warn us about." I hadn't known it would be this. The safe was small, maybe 2 feet across, Dull gray, the numbers on the dial faded from years of disuse. I turned them slowly, whispering the code he had chosen. The dial clicked open on the third try. Inside was a neat stack of envelopes wrapped in a rubber band, an old leather folder, a bundle of bonds, and a sealed letter with my name written in his handwriting. I didn't open the letter yet. Some things wait until you have room to feel them. At the very bottom, under the papers, lay Ryan's old laptop, one I hadn't seen since his college years. I pulled it out, brushing off the dust. The battery was long dead, but I still had the charger tucked away in a box. I plugged it in downstairs later, curious and afraid at once. When the screen finally lit up, the desktop background was a photo of him and Tina at the beach. I searched through his old folders, college essays, job applications, old photos. Then I found one labeled Records. Inside were files of transactions, spreadsheets, and emails. The more I read, the colder I felt. Loan statements, credit card debts, messages from Lucille urging him to move things fast. My son had been drowning, and instead of asking for help, he decided to drag me under with him. That night, I called Whitaker. His voice came through the receiver low and even. "You found it," he said, not as a question. "Yes, bonds, deeds, trust paperwork, even his old laptop." "Good. We'll need those. You can transfer assets into a private trust before he touches them again. I'll draft it quietly." "Will it be legal?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "It'll be cleaner than what they've done to you. The trust will protect your assets, Barbara. Everything notarized, every page accounted for." "Do it," I said. We met 2 days later in his small office downtown. The room smelled like old paper and lemon oil. He wore the same brown jacket I'd seen him in for 20 years. His hands shook slightly as he wrote, but his eyes were clear. "I'm calling this a preservation trust," he explained. "They won't be able to touch a cent. You'll remain the trustee. I'll file quietly under your maiden name." He handed me a pen, an old fountain pen with scratches along its barrel. "This is the same one I used the day your husband and I drew up the original title. Feels right to use it again." When I signed, the paper crackled faintly, like something finally exhaling. Later that afternoon, I returned home with copies sealed in an envelope. I placed one set in the safe and another beneath the loose drawer in my dresser. Every detail was listed, every signature witnessed. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, but precision. The kind of clarity that comes from seeing the full equation after years of blind faith. That evening, I installed 2 small cameras, one near the kitchen hallway and another in the living room, hidden behind the bookshelf. The instructions were easy enough, and the footage would automatically back up to the cloud. I told myself it was for safety, though I knew the truth. I was gathering evidence, preparing for a reckoning I hadn't yet named aloud. As I worked, I found myself humming an old tune my husband used to play while fixing the porch light. It calmed me, the rhythm of ordinary life still beating underneath the chaos. When the last camera clicked on, a tiny red light blinked in the dark. I whispered, "Good," and turned away. Before I went to bed, I opened the letter he'd left in the safe. The paper had yellowed at the edges, the ink fading slightly. His handwriting, slanted and firm, filled the page. "Barb, if you're reading this, something has tested you beyond fairness. Remember, the house is more than walls. It's proof of who you are. People, forget the cost of peace until it's gone. Don't let them take it. You know where the strength lives. Trust yourself." I folded the letter carefully, pressing it to my chest for a moment. He'd built the safe, but what he really left me was permission to defend what was mine without apology. Before sleeping, I checked the laptop once more. In one of the emails, Lucille had written to Ryan, "Make sure your mother signs the POA before you leave. Without it, you're stuck." I stared at the message until my eyes burned. They were planning something bigger than I'd imagined. But I had time now, and proof. Downstairs, the clock struck 11. The house felt steady again, like it was listening with me. I whispered to the quiet, "You built this, Henry. I'll make sure they don't get a single inch of it." I locked the safe, slid the plank back into place, and turned off the light. My hand brushed the edge of the abacus on my desk as I passed. The last bead rested alone on the right side. I pushed it back with a fingertip and said softly, "For what's next?" When I lay in bed, the faint red glow of the camera light pulsed in the hall. It was the heartbeat of a plan. The morning Ryan arrived with papers in his hand, the air felt unnaturally still. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, settling over the table like an unwanted guest. He stood there, tall and impatient, holding a folder the color of dry bone. "It's just a power of attorney form," he said, sliding it toward me. "This way I can handle things for you. Bills, taxes, life stuff." His smile was the same one he used as a boy when he'd broken a window and tried to convince me it was the wind's fault. "You don't need to worry about all this anymore, Mom," he added. "You've done enough." I looked at the form. My name was printed neatly beside his, the same pairing that had appeared on the forged appraisal. I picked up my glasses, put them on, and studied the fine print. "This would give you full control," I said quietly. "It's standard," he replied too quickly. "Everyone does it." Behind him, Tina hovered by the door, her arms crossed. She avoided my eyes, her phone in hand. "We need to submit it today," she said softly. "Lucille knows someone at the title office who can help." The mention of Lucille was enough to confirm what I already knew. This wasn't about helping. It was about erasing. I folded the papers neatly and handed them back. "No," I said. Ryan blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean," I said, meeting his eyes, "you won't be handling my life for me." He laughed, a sharp sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, this isn't personal. It's just practical. You're not getting any younger. What if something happens? You should trust me." "I did," I said. "Once." Tina shifted her weight, the floor creaking beneath her heels. "We're just trying to make things easier," she said, her voice thin. "For who?" I asked. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Something in me steadied then, like a string pulled taut. I folded my hands on the table. "You're right," I said softly. "It doesn't have to be hard. You'll manage your own affairs, and I'll manage mine. Simple." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gathered the papers, his movements clipped. "Fine. But when things fall apart, don't say I didn't try." When the door closed behind them, I exhaled slowly. My pulse hammered in my ears, but my thoughts were clear. I had seen this moment coming and prepared for it. Later that day, I received a text from Lucille. "Ryan is just looking out for you. You should be grateful." I deleted it without replying. That evening, I called Whitaker again. "He came with the papers," I said. "And?" I refused. "Good," he said. "Keep refusing. I filed the preservation trust under your maiden name. They won't see it if they go digging. Everything else, documents, deeds, is protected." "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet. Just be careful." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder of copies I'd made. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the room. The house no longer felt like a trap. It felt like an ally. Later that night, I overheard Ryan and Tina arguing in the driveway. The window was open just enough for their voices to drift in. "She'll ruin everything if she doesn't sign," he said. Tina's voice trembled. "Maybe we shouldn't push her. Maybe this isn't right." Lucille's name surfaced again, her words sharp even from a distance. "You've come this far. Don't back out now." I stayed by the window, silent, until their car pulled away. That night, I retrieved the small GPS tracker Whitaker had given me months ago, meant for safety when I used to drive long distances. I slipped it into the lining of Ryan's suitcase the next morning while they packed for their trip. He said they were heading to Hawaii for a much-needed break. I smiled as I zipped the case for him. "You deserve it," I said. "You've been working so hard." "Finally," he said, half laughing, unaware that I was memorizing every detail of his face. When they left, I watched the car roll down the driveway and disappear into the distance. I waited until the sound of the engine faded completely before turning toward the attic stairs. Up there, the safe waited, silent and steady. I opened it again, confirming every document, every bond, every page of the trust. Everything was accounted for. My husband's letter lay on top, its folds softened from handling. I touched it lightly, feeling the weight of what was coming. That night, I tested the hidden cameras one last time. The feed loaded perfectly. One showed the kitchen. The other captured the living room. The soft red light blinked in rhythm with my heartbeat. Before bed, I stood by the window and looked out over the vineyard rows, dark under the moonlight. I whispered, "You're leaving with suitcases. I'll be staying with proof." My reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but not fragile. There was something different now. A stillness that wasn't weakness. The kind that comes before movement. The next morning, as the taxi pulled away with them, Tina waved from the window. Ryan didn't look back. I closed the front door and locked it behind me, not to keep myself in, but to keep their echoes out. The house sighed in its old, familiar way. I set the kettle to boil, took my notebook from the counter, and wrote a single sentence underlined twice. "He's gone. Time to begin." The sound of the attic door closing will live in me forever. It wasn't loud, just a click followed by the heavy shuffle of Ryan's footsteps on the stairs. "You'll starve up there," he shouted, his voice sharp and breathless. At first I thought he was angry, just saying something he'd regret later. Then came the metallic slide of the lock, slow and deliberate, and the echo of his shoes moving away. After that, silence. I stood there, one hand still on the doorknob, the other gripping the railing. My mind refused to process what had just happened. He couldn't have meant it. But the car engine outside shattered that illusion. The rumble grew louder, then faded as they drove off. When the last trace of sound vanished, the house below me was still as a held breath. The attic was dim, except for the slant of light from the single window. Dust drifted in it like suspended time. I leaned against the wall, my pulse hammering in my throat. I called his name once, twice. Nothing. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor, the screen cracking into a dark mirror that no longer responded to touch. The cold crept up through the wooden planks. I wrapped my arms around myself and listened, to the creaks of the house, to my own unsteady breathing, to the faint hum of life continuing somewhere I couldn't reach. It's strange what you notice when you're trapped. The smell of dry wood, the way old paint flakes off in patterns like maps, the echo of your own heartbeat. I sat on the floor, knees drawn close, and tried to slow my thoughts. He'd locked me in. My son had locked me in. I don't know how long I sat there before the tears came, not from fear, but from something deeper, heavier. Grief, maybe. Not for myself, but for the boy I had raised. the one who used to cry when he thought I'd forgotten him at school. I closed my eyes and saw him at 6 years old, standing in front of the old hall closet, his small hands pounding the door from the inside. "Mom, don't leave me!" He'd shouted through his tears. He had locked himself in, playing hide and seek. I'd been downstairs doing laundry, unaware. When I finally heard him, I ran up and found him shaking, terrified. He clung to me like he'd been underwater. That memory came rushing back now, too vivid to ignore. The sound of his cries, the way his little hands gripped my sleeve, the whisper I told him to calm him down. "It's all right, honey. I'll always open the door." Now, decades later, I was on the other side of that same lesson. The irony cut deep. The child I had freed was now the man who decided I needed a cage. The wind outside rose and rattled the window. I crawled toward the beam where the floorboards felt uneven and brushed away a layer of dust. My fingers found the edge of the plank that hid the safe. The metal beneath was cold, but reassuring. I whispered, "You don't know what's under your feet, Ryan," and felt a quiet strength return to my chest. My husband's words echoed from memory. Every number adds up if you wait long enough. I pulled up the board and lifted the safe lid. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. Papers, deeds, bonds, the letter folded neatly on top. I reached for the small landline phone Whitaker had given me months ago, hidden there for emergencies. The wire coiled like a lifeline. I plugged it into the wall socket, the click of connection sounding louder than it should have. A dial tone. Relief flooded me. With trembling hands, I called Whitaker first. He didn't answer, but I left a message. "It's Barbara. He's locked me in the attic. Don't panic. I'm safe for now. I have the documents. Please contact Detective Sarah Miles. You'll find everything in my file under estate." My voice steadied as I spoke. "Tell her I'm not hurt, just trapped. And tell her I'm not finished yet." I hung up and sat back. The light from the window had shifted, falling across the old boxes stacked along the far wall. One had Ryan's handwriting on it, toys. I crawled to it and lifted the lid. Inside were small relics of his childhood, a baseball glove, a broken model airplane, a yellow ribbon he'd won for a spelling contest. I touched each one, feeling the years collapse between my fingertips. "I used to open locked doors for him," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Now I'm learning to open one for myself." The words hung in the air like a promise. I searched the box again and found a screwdriver, small but sturdy. If I could pry the hinge pins loose, maybe I could force the attic latch. But I didn't rush. Panic was the enemy. Patience had built this house. It would free me from it too. I worked in silence, loosening one hinge, then another. The light faded, replaced by the softer blue of dusk. Sweat dripped into my eyes, my hands aching, but I kept going. When the last pin gave way, the latch still held firm. I laughed quietly, a dry, tired sound. But there was no defeat in it. I knew that even if I couldn't open this door tonight, someone would. I had already set the wheels in motion. I sat down beside the safe again and rested my back against the wall. The house creaked like it was listening. "You've seen worse," I told it softly. "You've seen storms and losses and years that nearly broke us. You'll see justice too." Through the window, the moon rose pale and full, washing the room in silver. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. The attic no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a threshold, somewhere between what was taken from me and what I was about to reclaim. I thought of Ryan, somewhere over the ocean, believing I was helpless, believing the lock was enough. He didn't know that his own carelessness had left me every tool I needed: the safe, the documents, the evidence of his debts sitting quietly on his old laptop. He didn't know about the tracker tucked into his suitcase, the one already marking his every move. I smiled, small and steady, and whispered into the stillness. "You think you've buried me, but I'm the ground you're standing on." The house answered with a low groan as the wind pressed against its sides. I took that as agreement. Somewhere, deep in the walls, the pipes clicked, the sound rhythmic and alive. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the dark hold me, not as a cage but as a shelter. The world outside could wait. I had time, I had proof, I had breath, and I had a plan. Morning came without sound. Light bled slowly into the attic window, pale and indifferent. My back ached from the floor, but my mind was clear. The fever from earlier days was gone, replaced by something sharper. Focus. I picked up the old landline again and redialed Whitaker's number. This time he answered on the second ring. "Barbara?" His voice was calm, careful. "Where are you?" "I'm in the attic," I said. "He locked me in. But I'm fine. I have the safe, the papers, the trust file, all of it. Ryan's laptop, too." I heard him exhale, the kind of sigh people give when they've been expecting bad news, but still hope it won't come. "All right," he said. "Don't panic. Listen to me carefully. You can use that laptop to transfer your assets into the trust. You'll need to access your joint account first." "I already found it," I said. "The credentials were saved." "Good. Move everything to the trust, every cent. Once it's there, they can't touch it. I'll alert Detective Miles and Martha. You're not alone, Barbara. Keep the line open." After he hung up, I opened the laptop. The familiar whir of the old fan filled the silence. Ryan's desktop came up, full of folders and tabs he probably thought he'd erased. I clicked through until I found the joint account link. The numbers stared back at me, cold and unfeeling. Our savings, my pension, the bond funds, the balance of a life's work. I took a deep breath, then began. One transaction at a time, slow and steady, each movement of the cursor reclaiming a piece of myself. The total diminished on his side, reappearing in the new trust account under my maiden name, just as Whitaker had planned. When the confirmation screen appeared, my chest loosened for the first time in months. $500,000. Safe. The sound of the wind outside rose and fell, a reminder that time was moving again. I saved the receipts, encrypted the files, and emailed the documents to Whitaker's secure address. Then I copied everything onto a flash drive and slipped it into the envelope with the deeds. The landline rang once. It was Detective Sarah Miles. Her tone was measured, professional, but not cold. "Mrs. Hensley? Mr. Whitaker briefed me. Are you in danger right now?" "Not anymore," I said, "but I want you to have what I have." "Understood. Can you describe your location?" "In the attic of my house. They're gone. Hawaii." "All right," she said. "Don't try to leave on your own. Stay put until we arrive. We'll get you out safely. And, Barbara, thank you for trusting us." Her voice steadied me. There was something in it, a quiet respect that made me believe I wasn't invisible anymore. After we hung up, I recorded one more video using the laptop's camera. It wasn't vanity. It was record-keeping. My voice was low, deliberate. "This is Barbara Hensley. My son, Ryan Hensley, and his wife, Tina, have forged legal documents in an attempt to take ownership of my home and assets. The files proving this are in the trust folder. The original deeds are secured below the attic floor." I paused, then added softly, "This message isn't revenge. It's preservation. I raised him to know right from wrong. He chose wrong. I'm choosing peace." When I finished, I saved the recording and uploaded it to the cloud. A single progress bar filled the screen until it read, "Completed." I sat back against the wall, letting the faint hum of the computer comfort me. The attic, once a cage, now felt like command. I thought of Martha's soup, Whitaker's pen, Sarah's calm authority, all the small hands reaching quietly through the dark to pull me back into the light. After a while, I checked the GPS tracker on Ryan's suitcase. The dot blinked from Honolulu International Airport. Then another signal showed movement. Lucille's address, 3 states away. The pieces were aligning themselves, proof tracing a pattern no one could deny. I sent one final message to Whitaker. Transfer complete, detective informed, evidence secure. Then, on impulse, I opened the messaging app and typed a short text to Ryan. My fingers hovered before pressing send. I hope Hawaii is beautiful. You'll need the view where you're headed next. I erased it, too sharp, too bitter. Then I typed another. Don't worry about me. I'm safe. But that didn't feel right either. I stared at the screen until the answer came. Simple and true. I'm not dead. I pressed send. The clock on the wall ticked louder, the seconds lining up like soldiers. I waited, knowing that somewhere thousands of miles away, he'd wake up to find his world quietly altered. The air in the attic shifted, lighter somehow. I stood and looked through the window at the line of trees beyond the field. Morning had finally taken hold, bright and unwavering. I could hear faint sirens in the distance, maybe on the main road, maybe closer. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I sat back down beside the safe, the letter from my husband folded in my lap, and whispered, "It's done." And somewhere far above the ocean, my son's phone began to vibrate. Hawaii sunlight shimmered across the pool, all bright blue and careless. Tina leaned back in her chair, her sunglasses tilted just enough to catch her reflection in her phone. "Smile," she said, holding it up. Ryan forced one, his grin tight and unconvincing. The sound of waves drifted from somewhere beyond the resort fence, the slow rhythm of people who had earned their rest. But rest had a way of eluding him now. He reached for his phone on the table. "Just checking something," he muttered, though no one had asked. His fingers moved fast over the screen, the same way he used to when he was nervous. The app took a moment to load, then it appeared. Numbers, red arrows, and a balance that didn't make sense. His breath caught. He refreshed the screen. Still wrong. He checked again. The joint account, the one he'd watched for months, the one that carried his lifeline, now showed almost nothing. $57 and change. "What?" he said aloud. Tina lowered her sunglasses. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer, just scrolled faster, switching apps, checking every account he knew. The same emptiness stared back at him. "It's gone," he said. "What's gone?" "The money." His voice cracked. "All of it." She laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Then she saw his face. "Ryan..." He stood up, knocking over the drink beside him, ice scattering onto the tiles. "She couldn't have. She doesn't even know how." "Who?" "My mother." He walked toward the pool's edge, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. The palm trees swayed as though whispering against him. He opened his email, hoping for some banking error, some message that would explain this away. But instead, there it was. A notification. Transfer confirmation. Funds moved from the joint account to a new trust registered under a name he hadn't seen in decades. Barbara Lawson, his mother's maiden name. He cursed under his breath. "She didn't," he whispered. Tina rose from her chair, following him. "Ryan, calm down. Maybe it's..." He cut her off. "It's her. She took it." He paced the length of the pool, his shadow moving jaggedly across the tiles. "That's impossible," Tina said. "How would she even..." His phone buzzed. A new message. He opened it quickly. Just one line. "I'm not dead." The phone slipped from his hand and landed face down on the tile. The words burned into his eyes long after the screen went black. He sank to the edge of the pool, staring at the water as if it could swallow the noise in his head. Tina crouched beside him. "Ryan, listen. Maybe this is some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she's not senile," he snapped. "She planned this." For the first time, Tina looked scared. "Then we're in trouble." He ran his hands through his hair, the rhythm frantic. "Lucille said she'd handle it. She said the paperwork was clean." Tina's phone vibrated. A message from Lucille. "Call me. Now." They moved to a quiet corner by the cabanas, where Ryan's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. She moved everything into a trust, under a different name. There was a pause on the other end of the line, Lucille's tone clipped and icy. "Then you didn't move fast enough." "She must have had help," Ryan said. "Whitaker, it has to be him." "Then you'll fix it when you get back," Lucille said. "Do not call the bank. Do not alert anyone. If there's an investigation, you'll make it worse. Just act normal. Smile. Pretend nothing happened." He hung up, the phone heavy in his hand. He stared out at the water again, the sound of children playing nearby cutting through the quiet. Tina touched his arm lightly. "Ryan, what if she tells someone? About the papers?" He looked at her, and for the first time since they'd arrived, she saw fear behind the anger. "Then we're finished." That night, as they sat on the balcony, he opened his banking app again. The balance hadn't changed. He scrolled through his messages, staring at the one line that now felt like a sentence. "I'm not dead." He read it over and over, hearing her voice in it. Calm, certain, final. Tina poured herself a drink. "You should call her." He laughed bitterly. "And say what? Hey, Mom, glad you're alive, and also thanks for stealing my money?" She didn't answer. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "She thinks she's won, but she hasn't." Down below, a group of tourists were taking photos by the pool. Their laughter floated up through the night air. The sound of joy, real and careless, was almost unbearable. Ryan turned his phone over and over in his hands. "She's always been smarter than me," he said quietly. Not to Tina, not to anyone. "I just forgot." Tina reached for him, but he didn't move. The ocean wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of salt and distance. Miles away in Ohio, the house stood silent under a pale moon. In the attic, a single light glowed from the laptop screen. Files uploaded, evidence sealed, a story being rewritten in real time. Ryan closed his eyes, his breathing uneven. Somewhere between the guilt and the panic, he realized what frightened him most wasn't losing the money. It was losing her, and knowing he was the one who'd caused it. He stood, pacing the balcony, muttering to himself, "She can't do this to me." But even as he said it, he knew she already had. Back in the room, Tina scrolled through social media, her reflection in the glass a shimmer of uncertainty. "Ryan," she said softly, "what if she calls the police?" He turned to her slowly. "Then I guess we'll find out what's left when the truth starts talking." He looked down at the phone one last time, the screen still faintly lit, her message frozen there like a scar. "I'm not dead." And for the first time, he believed her. The attic door opened with a groan that startled the silence. I didn't move right away. The first thing I saw was a flash of blue, a uniform. Detective Sarah Miles stood in the doorway, her badge glinting faintly against the light. Behind her came two officers and Whitaker, leaning on his cane. "Mrs. Hensley?" she said, her tone firm but gentle. I nodded, my throat tight with relief I hadn't known I was holding. "Up here," I whispered. They helped me down the stairs slowly, each step echoing with years of weight I hadn't felt until then. At the bottom, the house smelled the same as always, coffee and lemon cleaner, but the air was different. It was no longer theirs. It was mine again. Martha was in the living room, tears streaking her face. "You stubborn woman," she said, hugging me so tightly I thought she might break a rib. "You couldn't just call sooner?" "I needed time," I said softly. "And evidence." Detective Miles guided me to a chair. "You did everything right, Mrs. Hensley," she said. "The documents you sent, the recordings, the account transfers, even the tracker location. It's all solid." Whitaker placed a folder on the coffee table, the papers neatly clipped together. "Your son left quite a trail," he said. "Emails with Lucille, the forged appraisal, the POA drafts. They thought they were clever, but digital ink doesn't lie." Sarah nodded. "We've already confirmed the trust's legality. Your funds are secure. What we need now is consent to seize and review the footage from your cameras." "It's already backed up," I said. "Cloud storage. The password is written inside the folder." One of the officers opened a laptop and connected to the server. Within moments, the living room filled with the soft hum of the screen. Footage played, days and nights of quiet cruelty. Tina pacing, rehearsing lines for her videos. Ryan standing behind me at the kitchen counter, his hand gripping my shoulder just a second too long. Their laughter as they spoke of clearing space, of liquidating assets. At one point, the screen showed me at the table, pen in hand, hesitating before signing a form. Tina whispered off camera, "Just sign, Barbara. It's fine." My hand shook but didn't move. The video froze on my face. Tired, uncertain, but unbroken. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes scanning the screen. "This isn't just financial exploitation," she said. "This qualifies as elder abuse under state law." Whitaker nodded. "We'll let the DA make that call, but it's enough to open a full case." I looked at the screen again. They really thought no one would see. Sarah's expression softened. "People like this count on silence. You change that." Martha came closer, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than they ever guessed, Barb." I glanced at her hand, then at the screen where my house, my home, had been dissected piece by piece. "The walls were listening," I said quietly. "They just needed someone to ask the right questions." Sarah's phone buzzed. She stepped away to answer, then turned back toward us. "That was airport security. Ryan and Tina are on their way home. We'll be waiting when they land." I nodded, my fingers gripping the armrest of the chair. For a long moment, no one spoke. The footage continued to play, flickering between rooms, each frame a record of my endurance. Whitaker closed the folder. "Barbara, once this is over, you can pursue charges or let the state handle it. Either way, you'll be protected." "I don't want revenge," I said, my voice steady. "I just want truth, the kind that doesn't need to shout." Martha smiled faintly. "You've already got that." Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the house like a quiet hand. I looked out the window and saw the garden swaying gently, the roses bending but unbroken. "Do you know," I said softly, "he used to bring me roses from that garden every Mother's Day. I thought I'd lost that part of him completely." Sarah looked at me thoughtfully. "Maybe this will be the thing that brings him back to himself. Sometimes the truth does that, when it hurts enough." She stood, slipping her notebook into her coat pocket. "We'll set up security for the night until the warrants come through. Rest if you can." I nodded, though I knew I wouldn't sleep. As the officers moved quietly through the house, checking locks and windows, I walked to the mantel where my family photos used to hang. The wall was still bare, faint outlines left where frames had once been. I touched the faded paint, tracing the ghost of one particular square, the one where Ryan's graduation photo used to be. "I'll put them back tomorrow," I said to no one in particular. Whitaker smiled as he gathered his things. "Then I'd say tomorrow's going to be a better day." The footage on the screen looped back to the beginning, the faint click of the lock, my face turning toward the sound. I didn't flinch this time. I just watched, steady, as the image of my own fear became something smaller, something already past. Sarah's voice drifted from the hallway. "He won't get away with this, Barbara. The walls have eyes, and now so does the law." When they left, the house felt alive again, humming faintly in its bones. I sat alone for a while, listening to the ticking of the clock. It no longer sounded like time running out. It sounded like time catching up. They came home on a Wednesday afternoon, the same way they'd left. Together, confident, careless. The taxi pulled up in front of the house, tires grinding against the gravel. Ryan stepped out first, tan from the island sun, sunglasses still on, even though the sky was overcast. Tina followed, her phone already lifted to film the driveway. "Back home," she announced brightly, as if life were a video to edit later. What they didn't know was that 2 unmarked police cars had been waiting for nearly an hour, parked discreetly down the road. Detective Sarah Miles stood near the porch, coat collar turned up, eyes unreadable. Whitaker stood beside her, holding his cane with both hands, the folder tucked firmly under his arm. I watched from the window, hidden behind the curtain. My hands were steady, my heart not. "Mom," Ryan called out as he reached the door, keys jangling. "You here?" The door opened before he could touch the handle. Sarah stepped forward, badge raised. "Ryan Hensley?" He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "Yeah? Can I help you?" "I'm Detective Miles, County Division. We need to speak with you about an open investigation regarding elder financial exploitation." His smile faltered. "What?" Tina's phone dropped a few inches. "Wait, this must be a mistake." Whitaker's voice cut through, firm and calm. "No mistake, Mr. Hensley. I believe you recognize these." He held up a folder, the papers inside neatly visible through the clear sleeve. Appraisal forms, false signatures, emails printed in black and white. Ryan's face went pale. "Where did you—" "From your own laptop," Sarah said. "You might want to sit down." Tina stepped back, her mouth trembling. "Ryan, you said it was handled." He turned to her, his voice sharp. "Don't start." Lucille's name appeared on the caller ID flashing across Tina's screen. She silenced it quickly, her hand shaking. Sarah gestured to the driveway. "We can do this here, or we can do it downtown. Your choice." Ryan looked at me then. I had stepped out onto the porch without realizing it. The air was cool, the sky heavy with early rain. I met his eyes, and for a brief second, I saw the boy he'd once been, the one who used to run to me after nightmares. But the look didn't last. "Mom," he started, his voice small now, almost pleading. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "You thought I'd disappear before the truth did." His jaw tightened. "You left me no choice." "There's always a choice," I replied. "You just chose yourself." Tina's tears came fast, streaking the foundation, on her cheeks. "Lucille told us it was safe. She said it was legal." Sarah's tone remained even. "Lucille Moore is also under investigation. Her involvement has been documented. You'll both have a chance to speak. For now, please step outside." As the officers moved closer, Ryan's shoulders slumped. He turned toward the yard, staring at the roses I'd pruned only weeks before. "Those were Dad's favorite," he muttered, barely audible. I didn't answer. The garden didn't either. It had already witnessed enough. Tina took a shaky breath. Barbara, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just trying to help him. I believe you, I said softly. That's what makes it so sad. Lucille arrived minutes later, her car screeching to a stop at the end of the drive. She stepped out in pearls and panic, calling, "Ryan, don't say another word." Her voice carried the brittle confidence of someone used to controlling the room. Sarah met her halfway. "Mrs. Moore, we've been expecting you." Lucille's eyes darted to me, then to the officers, then to the folder in Whitaker's hand. "This is absurd," she said. "A family matter, not a criminal one." Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Forgery, coercion, and theft of assets exceeding $500,000 isn't family business, Mrs. Moore. It's felony business." Lucille tried to speak again, but the sound that came out was more breath than word. The officers moved efficiently, reading her rights as they escorted her toward the car. Ryan turned to me one last time. "You think this makes you the hero?" he said bitterly. "No," I said. "It just makes me free." The rain began to fall then, slow and cold. The drops tapped against the porch railing and the roses, washing the dust from their petals. Sarah nodded toward the officers. "Take them in." As the cars pulled away, Tina looked back through the rear window. For a brief moment, her eyes met mine, and I thought I saw something that looked like apology. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was just reflection. Whitaker rested his hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Barbara." I shook my head. "No, the truth did." Sarah gave a small nod. "You're safe now. We'll handle the rest." I looked at her, grateful for the steadiness in her gaze. "Thank you," I said, "for believing me." She smiled faintly. You'd be surprised how often mothers are right. When the last car disappeared down the road, the house stood quiet again. I walked back inside, the floors creaking softly under my feet. The air smelled of rain and relief. I paused in the hallway, where my husband's photograph had once hung. I placed it back on its hook, the glass still intact, the frame steady. Outside, the sky began to clear. The storm had passed, leaving behind air that felt lighter, clean. For the first time in years, the house felt like it was breathing again. I whispered to the empty room, "Welcome home." The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and cold air. I sat on the wooden bench near the front, my hands folded neatly on my lap, the same way I'd done in church pews years ago. The hum of whispers filled the room, reporters, locals, even a few strangers who had followed the story from afar. I didn't look at them. My eyes were fixed on the small brass plaque behind the judge's seat, the one that read, "In God We Trust." Ryan sat 2 rows ahead, dressed in a dark suit that didn't quite fit. His tie was crooked. Tina sat beside him, her hair pulled back tightly, eyes downcast. Lucille wasn't there. Her attorney had filed a plea arrangement, but her name hung in the air like a cold perfume. When the bailiff called the session to order, the murmur fell away. The district attorney stood, crisp and sure. "Your Honor, the state presents its case against Ryan and Tina Hensley, charged with elder financial exploitation, fraud, and conspiracy to commit forgery." Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Whitaker sat to my right, his cane resting beside him. He leaned over and whispered, "Stay steady, Barbara. You don't have to prove anything. The facts already do." Detective Sarah Miles was called first. Her testimony was calm, deliberate, each sentence measured. She described the recordings, the financial transfers, the timeline that led to my confinement. The courtroom lights glinted off her badge as she spoke. The victim's own documentation was essential. Without Mrs. Hensley's diligence, this case might never have been uncovered. Ryan kept his eyes on the floor. Tina's shoulders trembled once, barely noticeable. Then Whitaker took the stand. His voice carried the weight of a man who had seen both justice and its absence. "Barbara trusted her son," he said. "That trust was violated through manipulation and deceit. But she also trusted herself. And that's why we're here today." When it was my turn, the courtroom seemed to shrink. The judge asked if I wanted to read a statement. I stood, unfolding the page I had written the night before. My voice felt steady, though my hands trembled. "I didn't come here for revenge," I began. "I came for acknowledgement. For years, I believed that love could fix anything, that patience could rewrite someone's choices. But love doesn't mean surrender. It means holding others accountable when they've forgotten who they are." I paused, meeting Ryan's eyes for the first time since that day on the porch. "I raised you to be kind, Ryan, to earn what you have. Somewhere along the way, you learned that taking was easier than building. I hope this reminds you that shortcuts always cost more than they give." The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. I folded the paper back into my purse and sat down. Then came Tina's turn. She hesitated, clutching her statement with both hands. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said softly. "I thought we were just moving paperwork. I believed Ryan. I believed my mother." Her voice cracked. "And I believed the lie that money fixes everything." Her tears came then, real ones, the kind that can't be rehearsed. "I'm sorry, Barbara," she whispered. "I should have stopped it." I nodded once, unable to speak. When Ryan took the stand, he didn't read from a paper. His voice was low, almost unrecognizable. "I thought I was helping us all. The debts got bad, and I panicked. I told myself I deserved what you had because I was family. I told myself you'd forgive me." He swallowed hard. "I don't expect that now. I don't know how I became this person." The judge listened quietly, expression unreadable. When Ryan finished, the DA asked no further questions. The gavel's soft tap signaled the end of testimony. The closing statements came and went in a blur of legal phrases: intent, negligence, restitution. I barely heard them. My focus was on the small photo I kept inside my purse. Ryan at 10 years old, missing front teeth, arms covered in grass stains. That was the version of him I chose to remember as the jury filed out to deliberate. An hour later, they returned. The foreperson stood, reading the verdict clearly. On the charge of elder financial exploitation, guilty. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. The words didn't hit like thunder. They landed softly, inevitable as rain. Ryan's shoulders sagged. Tina sobbed quietly. The judge spoke of restitution, probation, community service, penalties tempered by cooperation. The court offered Ryan the chance to enter a rehabilitation program instead of prison time under strict supervision. The sentence wasn't harsh, but it was just. When the session ended, I stood slowly. The air in the courtroom felt lighter, like something had finally been exhaled. Ryan turned once before being escorted away. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left, only recognition. A flicker of the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard. Outside, reporters waited on the courthouse steps. Questions filled the air. "Mrs. Hensley, how does it feel to win? Will you forgive your son? What message do you have for families facing the same thing?" I didn't stop. I just said, this wasn't a win. It was a reckoning. Sometimes justice sounds like forgiveness whispered through law. Martha met me at the bottom of the steps, wrapping her arms around me. "It's over," she said. "No," I replied softly. "It's beginning again, just in a different way." Whitaker smiled faintly beside us. "You handled it with grace, Barbara. You gave the system something rare, proof and patience. Detective Miles tipped her head. And you gave others courage. You'd be surprised how many will speak up after today. I looked out across the square where the courthouse shadow stretched over the street. The world went on. Cars passing, people laughing, time moving. For the first time, I didn't feel left behind by it. Maybe, I said, it's time I start living for myself again. The wind lifted my hair as we walked away, carrying with it the sound of the gavel echoing faintly behind us. Months passed before the house stopped sounding like a wound. Silence had its own rhythm now, a kind one. The clock ticked without dread. The floorboards no longer sighed under the weight of secrets. I'd started opening the windows again, letting the smell of the vineyard and rain drift through the rooms. For the first time in years, it smelled like home instead of history. The reporters stopped calling after a while. The headlines faded from front pages to side columns. Retired bookkeeper outsmarts her son in $500K estate fraud case. Then even that disappeared, replaced by fresher scandals. That suited me just fine. Justice, when done right, doesn't need applause. The town, though, remembered. When I went to the grocery store, the cashier, young enough to be my grandson, always gave me an extra smile. People who used to look away now nodded. A few whispered, "Good for you," as I passed. I didn't need their validation. But it was strange how decency could echo once truth was spoken aloud. The roses in the garden bloomed late that summer. I pruned them carefully, humming under my breath. Martha often joined me on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee between us. "You ever think about selling this place?" she asked once, half teasing. "Not yet," I said. "The walls and I still have things to talk about." We both laughed softly. Then her tone changed. "You ever hear from Ryan?" I shook my head. "Only through his lawyer. He's in the rehabilitation program. They say he's doing well." I paused, looking out toward the horizon. He'll have to rebuild one truth at a time. Maybe that's what he needed. Martha nodded. "And you?" "I'm rebuilding too," I said. "Just quieter." That fall, I received a letter addressed in Ryan's handwriting. The return address read Haven House Rehabilitation Center. I turned it over in my hands for a long time before opening it. The paper inside was plain, lined, his handwriting uneven. "Mom, I don't know how to begin except to say I'm sorry. Every day here feels like a mirror I can't look away from. They ask us to name the moment we lost ourselves. I keep going back to the attic door. I hear the lock click and wish I could undo it. You didn't deserve what I did. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be someone you could forgive. If you ever want to write, I'll be waiting. Ryan." I folded the letter carefully, slid it into the drawer beside the abacus, and closed it. Forgiveness wasn't a switch to flip. It was a garden. You tended it until it grew. Later that week, I met with a young woman from a local charity foundation. She couldn't have been more than 25, bright-eyed and nervous. "Mrs. Hensley," she said, shaking my hand, "we can't thank you enough for your donation. It's going to help so many single mothers get back on their feet." Her voice trembled with gratitude, and for a second I saw myself in her. The same fear, the same hope I once had when life was all debt and courage. "It's not a donation," I told her. "It's a return." She blinked, unsure what I meant, and I smiled. "One generation gives, the next rebuilds. Just promise me you'll use it well." "I will," she said, eyes shining. When she left, I sat on the porch as the light turned gold across the vineyard. The porch swing creaked softly under me, an old rhythm that had waited patiently for peace to return. I held Ryan's letter one more time before lighting a match. The paper caught easily, curling into flame that glowed orange before turning to ash. Martha watched from the door. "You sure about that?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm. "He doesn't need my words to find his way. He needs his own." We sat together in silence, the smoke drifting up into the evening air. The last of the sunset burned along the horizon, painting the rows of vines in amber light. A breeze swept through, carrying the faint smell of earth and rain. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. The sound wasn't solemn anymore. It was ordinary, grounding. Martha touched my hand. "You did good, Barb." I smiled faintly. Maybe I just did what needed to be done. She stood and stretched, heading down the steps. "You coming tomorrow? They're opening the new community garden downtown. That charity girl said your name's on the plaque." I laughed quietly. "Is it?" "She said it was your idea. Healing grows where truth is planted, remember?" I looked out at my roses, blooming even as the night crept in. "Then maybe I will go." After she left, I stayed on the porch, watching the light fade into a soft blue-gray. The house behind me was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt full, of air, of memory, of things that had survived. I whispered into the dusk, "He's finding his way. So am I." The wind carried the words away like a promise kept. The morning light was soft and kind, the sort that slips through curtains like forgiveness. I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching mist lift off the vineyard. The vines shimmered under the sun, their leaves trembling in a breeze that smelled faintly of earth and dew. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a reminder of what I'd lost. It felt like proof of what I'd kept. I ran my thumb along the edge of the mug and thought of how quiet justice works. Not in headlines or applause, but in the slow, steady rebuilding of ordinary life. The porch swing creaked softly, matching my heartbeat. I had stopped, checking the mail every day, stopped expecting new apologies or explanations. Some stories close themselves quietly when they've said enough. Martha came by with her usual knock, 3 short taps and 1 long. She carried a basket of pears and a newspaper folded under her arm. "Your name's in here again," she said, setting it on the table. "They called you the woman who rewrote her own ending." I smiled. "That's dramatic." "They like a story that makes people feel things," she said. "And yours does." I looked out at the vineyard, rows upon rows of green stretching beyond the fence. "I didn't rewrite anything," I said. "I just told the truth out loud." She poured herself some coffee and sat beside me. "You planning to go into town later? The foundation's opening that new wing this afternoon." "Yes," I said. "I want to see it. I heard they hung a small plaque there. Nothing big." Martha chuckled. "Knowing you, it'll just say something simple like, 'Keep growing.'" "Close," I said with a smile. When she left, I went upstairs to my old desk, the one that had survived every season of my life. The abacus still sat there, its beads resting in perfect balance. Beside it lay the small envelope I'd placed in the safe months ago, now empty except for a single note. I unfolded it and read the words my husband had written long ago, the ink faded but legible. "You are stronger than silence. Never forget it." I added my own line beneath his in neat handwriting. I didn't. Then I folded it again and slipped it back into the safe, now containing nothing of material worth, only the truth that had rebuilt my life. I locked it gently, not to hide it, but to preserve it. Outside, the day grew brighter. I walked through the garden, past the roses now in late bloom. Their scent was sharp and alive. The same earth that had once felt heavy with sorrow now held something else. Renewal. The car arrived from the Charity Foundation just before noon. The young woman from before stepped out, waving as she approached the porch. "Mrs. Hensley, it's such an honor to see you again. The new wing looks beautiful. You'll love it." She paused, noticing the stillness around us. "It's so peaceful here," she said. "It didn't used to be," I replied. "But peace has a way of finding its way back if you let it." She smiled, nodding. "You're an inspiration to a lot of people, you know." I didn't answer right away. I looked out toward the vines, shimmering in the noon light, and said softly, "I'm just a reminder that you can start over at any age." She left soon after, waving from the driveway. I stood there until her car disappeared down the hill. The wind moved through the vineyard, soft and constant. I breathed it in. Later that evening, I sat on the porch again, the light turning gold, the air sweet and cool. Fireflies flickered near the rose bushes, their glow brief but certain. I thought of Ryan, somewhere far away, maybe tending to his own garden in that rehabilitation center, learning the language of patience one day at a time. I thought of Tina, who had written once asking to volunteer at the same charity. Perhaps healing wasn't linear. Perhaps it just took different roads for each of us. I took out my notebook, the one that had survived everything, and wrote a single line across a clean page. Justice isn't loud. It's the sound of your own breath when you finally feel safe again. The porch light flickered on automatically as the sun dipped below the hills. The world was quiet, gentle. Somewhere deep inside the house, the clock struck 7. 7 chimes that echoed through walls that now felt whole. I leaned back in my chair, the last of the light touching the rim of my cup. The safe beneath the floor held only paper now, but it didn't matter. I didn't need locks anymore. I had understanding. I smiled to myself, the air cool on my skin, and whispered the words that had carried me through everything. "I'm not dead." Then I added, "Just for me, I'm alive." The breeze carried it away, mingling with the hum of the evening and the steady rhythm of a life reclaimed. The porch glowed under the soft wash of twilight, and the vineyard below swayed gently, as if nodding in quiet agreement.